We're back with more of the most misleading stats in Pokemon. These Pokemon, among the most valued at what they do, possess stat spreads which suggest they'll go one way, but the way they actually play tends to go in an entirely different direction, almost as if they have stats in the wrong place. And we'll be exploring the many different shapes these come in as we jump right in with not one Pokemon, not a duo, but a trio of speedy physical attackers. Or so you'd think looking at their stat spread. With Lucario, which seemed more attuned to special attacking than the Swords Dance icon it turned out to be, at least there wasn't actually that much of a disparity between its base 115 special attack and base 110 attack, only 5 points. These three, though, are all much stronger on the physical side than the special side. Tapu Koko has 115 base attack, while its special attack is merely 95, which, in addition to being much lower, isn't particularly impressive in its own right, at least not by the standard of the Fairy generation. Dragapult's special attack at least breaks the base 100 benchmark, but it's flat 100. In addition to also not being much more impressive, it's gapped even harder by its base 125 attack. Swellow at least has the lowest gap with base 85 attack and 75 special attack. Well, at least it does starting in Gen 7. Putting aside the fact that even the better of the two attacking stats isn't all that, Swellow was actually first seen as a special attacker in Gen 6, where it had 50, yes, 50 special attack. So why is that they all primarily attack from the special side? They have been known to attack physically before, primarily Swellow, but by and large they have become known as special attackers whose most common foray into physical attacks is a U-turn with 0 attack IVs used for momentum purposes. This is because even when they have good physical options available, their special move pools are far better. For starters, Tapu Koko, whose lower special attack was directly compensated by the electric terrain and summon powering up its electric stab, would much rather be dishing out Thunderbolts than recoil-inducing wild charges, especially since in Gen 7 you wanted to hit ground types with special attack invested hidden power ices, since Tapu Koko lacks any physical attacks for this purpose. This also applies to fairy moves, since Tapu Koko lacks play rough and thus wants to dish out dazzling gleams with as much oomph as possible, whether with Choice Specs or Calm Mind and Farium Z. Even after Z crystals and hidden power were removed in Gen 8 and electric terrain was nerfed to only provide a 30% boost as opposed to its previous 50%, Tapu Koko was still a special attacker whether calm minding or not. Again, because Thunderbolt was better than Wild Charge, and it had to rely on Dazzling Gleam for ground coverage. Tapu Koko could attack physically on occasion in Gen 7, luring special tanks like Assault Vest Magearna with Z Wild Charge, but that was rare. For all intents and purposes, Tapu Koko was pretty much exclusively a special attacker. Meanwhile, Dragapult actually did attack physically quite often, thanks to the power of its stab dragon darts fitting in on all sorts of effective sets, but barring the Choice Band set, it's actually attacking at least partially from the special side, and quite often is only using special attacks, drawing from the embarrassment of riches that is its move pool. It has an incredible stab duo with both Draco Meteor, whose huge base power is known to compensate for lower special attack stats, but still wouldn't be nearly as effective if Dragapult weren't also brandishing the best attacking type in the game, Ghost. The immediacy of Shadow Ball being spammable into just about everything, while having key super effective targets and bulky psychics like the Slow Twins, means Dragapult is actually threatening a great deal of instant damage against much of the metagame with Choice Specs attached. Alternatively, once status has been spread, as Dragapult often does with its own Will-O-Wisp or Thunderwave, it can use even more powerful Ghost Stab and Hex. It also has incredible coverage with Flamethrower to instantly roast steals like Ferrothorn, potentially expanded even further for more specific super effective stings like Thunderbolt or Hydro Pump. Gen 6 Swellow still sometimes went with the Status Orb Guts Facade sets that have been its trademark for the past 2 generations, but even with base 50 special attack, it shifted to primarily special attacking with Choice Specs. It was a lower tier Pokemon, no doubt about that, but even by NU standards, base 50 special attack for a wall-breaking special attacker is utterly pathetic. It would have been awful by NU standards in Gen 2, let alone Gen 6. What Swellow got, though, was not just Boom Burst, but Stab Boom Burst, the overwhelming base power of what transcended its awful special attack. What made it even better was Swellow's Scrappy ability, meaning it bypassed Ghost types would-be normal immunity and hit them neutrally as it might anything else. Meanwhile, the NU Steel types, Steelix and Ferroseed, were sufficiently vulnerable to Heat Wave, so that their normal resist didn't translate to actually answering Swellow. Of course, Game Freak leaned into Swellow's special attacking in Gen 7 by giving it a stunning plus 75 to its base special attack, which is still far from impressive in its own right. Still wouldn't have been noteworthy in Gen 2 NU, but with Stab, Boom Burst, and Toe, it actually moved up a tier to RU. In addition to their special attacking move pools, the common trait between the three is that they're all incredibly fast. Swellow is the slowest and it's already uncommonly fast, packing Weavile tier base 125 speed that outruns Greninja, Tornadus Therian, and Alakazam, whose speed stats are already considered outstanding outstanding. Tapu Koko is even faster, and Dragapult's speed is so far ahead of everything else, it often gets to hit even harder by running a special attack boosting Modest Nature, which the other two can't quite afford. Their immense speed actually makes their special attack better, because they get so many opportunities from outspeeding pretty much every unboosted Pokemon on the opposing team. Now for a different breed of non-physical attacker, we have Grimmsnarl. But before we get to how Grimmsnarl never uses that high attack stat it has, here's a word from our sponsor, the GOAT, Surfshark VPN. A VPN, or a virtual private network, is a server that you can connect to that encrypts not only your private data, but also your location. You can even use this to pretend like you're in another country. Now, why would this come in handy? Well, with streaming services like Netflix, you're often region locked. For example, if I were to vacation in Japan, where there are no subtitles on my anime, I could use Surfshark and change my VPN back to the US or vice versa, and now I have American Netflix wherever I go. You can do this with multiple countries because Surfshark has over 4,500 plus servers in over 140 countries. You supercharge any streaming service you have by doing this. And of course, being a VPN, Surfshark keeps your outgoing data encrypted and safe. For example, I travel a decent amount, which means I'm often at the airport and need to use the Wi-Fi to keep track of my spending, because sometimes I go overboard on overpriced meals. But people on the public Wi-Fi at the airport could be lurking to access some of my sensitive data. But thanks to Surfshark, I just boot it up and my data is safe and secure. And one of the best features that separates Surfshark from the other VPNs is that you can use it on unlimited devices. That's right, no additional subscriptions required. You can put it on all of your devices. And there's no risk thanks to their 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you want a sick VPN and also support the channel to help us produce more content, you can click the link in the description below and go to surfshark.com/fallswipe or use code fallswipe at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Grimmsnarl's base 120 attack would lead you to believe it's some sort of hard hitter. It's slow, but it's got good HP and workable special defense, so something in that vein, right? This is supported by the Prankster ability, giving it priority bulk up, shoring up its defense and boosting its attack further. It even has a signature move called Spirit Break. Sounds strong, indeed it does, but for a Pokemon with the same base attack stat as fellow Dark-type Weavile, Grimmsnarl actually finds itself completely and utterly dedicated to team support. It's all about those Prankster utility moves. Sure, it'll throw in some actual damage like Spirit Break, but Grimmsnarl is practically synonymous with Priority Reflect and Light Screen in both VGC and singles. It has many other superb options and doesn't absolutely always run the dual screens, but it sure does far more often than not. Grimmsnarl became one of VGC's most successful support Pokemon for the tremendous depth of support it provided. In addition to dual screens, it had Taunt to shut down opposing utility moves, though amusingly, it was immune to opposing Grimmsnarl's taunts thanks to Dark types being immune to the Prankster ability. Grimmsnarl could also function as speed control with Thunderwave's paralysis, Scary Face's harsh speed drop, or if it wanted to break away from dual screens and the light clay it usually holds to extend their duration, it could even trick a lagging tail. It could also set up a KO for a special attacking teammate by harshly dropping an opponent's special defense with Fake Tears, and beyond Prankster, also had another tremendous priority move in Fake Out. Absolutely overflowing with options as it was, it's no wonder Grimmsnarl didn't focus much on direct damage dealing. It could leave that to Pokemon better suited to it. In singles, Grimmsnarl did actually attack in the lower tiers with sets like Choice Band and Bulk Up, but it was used in the highest tiers too, even Ubers in fact, and there of course it was setting up dual screens. It didn't help that in addition to its low speed, Grimmsnarl's stabs weren't actually that powerful. Even its signature Spirit Break is less about power, only coming in at 75, and more about that guaranteed special attack drop, which, surprise surprise, actually extends its utility even further, which is why it's the go-to move in VGC as well. As if it didn't do enough already, it can also weaken monsters like Kyogre while doing a bit of damage. As a bonus, speaking of special attack weakening damage moves, it is utterly bizarre that Grimmsnarl can't learn Snarl, as illustrated by this tremendous image. It also doesn't learn Knockoff, but maybe that would be too much utility. Now, speaking of utility, the next Pokemon brings it while also hitting much harder than its attack stat would suggest, as we have Araquanid. Araquanid is a physical attacker generally not geared towards the practice stat-wise, but also has deceptive utility extending past attacking into solid team support. Araquanid's Water Bubble doubles its attack stat when it's using its Water Stab, so yeah, it hits incredibly hard with Liquidation, but not only does it not hit hard with other moves, including its secondary stab, it's also insanely slow, with typing not exactly renowned for its efficiency offensively or defensively. However, it's still got a lot to like. Water Bubble helps both offensively and defensively in other ways as well, making Araquanid a physical attacker immune to burn while also effectively providing it a fire resist. Its HP isn't anything to brag about, but it's got good defense and stunning special defense. It's not going to be a wall, but it's not trying to be, and being difficult to take out with counterattacks improves its offense. Speaking of, water is one of the best stabs in the game, so if you're going to pick one type to power up, it's a great choice, especially when used on rain. But Araquanid goes beyond that with its non-water stab utility. In VGC 2017, the low battle power Bug Bite isn't doing that much damage from Araquanid's low attack, but what it does do is perform the critical task of sealing opposing 50% recovery berries from key Pokemon in Snorlax, Tapu Fini, and Alolan Muck. Meanwhile, Wide Guard is immensely useful for defense against spread moves. In singles, Araquanid's main draw is setting the specific yet potentially devastating Sticky Web, enabling slow yet powerful wall-breaking teammates somewhat akin to Trick Room in VGC. Thanks to Magic Coat, Araquanid is also not easily taunted or bait for the setting of opposing entry hazards. You'll wind up bouncing these effects back on yourself if you try. The sheer power of Liquidation means it's not easy to boost against either. In fact, Araquanid probably has more physical power than the next mon, Mega Bandit. We've ripped into Mega Bandit some time ago, but man does its failure of a design deserve the repeat treatment, given that it's, a Mega. It has the opposite setup of the trio at the beginning of the video, whereas their lower attacking stats would lead you to expect less damage of them than they actually dish out. Mega Bandit has one of the most outright attack stats in the game. Even by Mega standards, it's pretty insane, and yet it is completely incapable of dealing damage. Its stab options are utterly pathetic. Its most quote-unquote reliable option is the 70 base power Shadow Claw, which is so weak it has a mere 31% chance to KO a full health Mew with zero bulk investment, despite being super effective. Other so-called achievements include a 93.8% chance to not KO max HP Mew after Stealth Rock and failing to 3-hit KO Gliscor. The alternative is the 2-turn Phantom Force, which isn't bad for being 2-turn, but for not being strong enough as Shadow Force might be, or on a good enough Pokemon to justify the 2-turn effect as Bounce might be on Gyarados. At only 90 base power, Phantom Force is clocking in at the physical equivalent of moves like Psychic, except it takes 2 turns and the secondary effect is Breaking Through Protect, which again, wouldn't be so bad if Mega Bandit wasn't so utterly terrible in literally every other aspect. However, you'd expect, or at least hope, or maybe just wish, that if everything else is going to be so bad, that attack stat can really bring the pain, and yet even the stronger option in Phantom Force doesn't even come close to one-hit KOing Slowbro after Stealth Rock. Well, maybe it's not scary on the first turn, but after a boost, oh wait, no boosting options. Yeah, no, that's cool. Priority Sucker Punch and Stab Shadow Sneak are cool, but they can't beat everything, nor can the decent but only just coverage of Knockoff and Gunk Shot. It doesn't even have the decency to have close combat, instead just Brick Break. Mega Bandit is deceptive in that despite its attack stat being on par with Rampardos, Mega Gallade, and just barely under Ultra Necrozma, the most useful thing it's going to do is use Prankster for Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, and Destiny Bond, which nobody could call bad, unless such a strategy is taking up your Mega slot. You don't want to sacrifice your Mega to be the highlight of its damage dealing, and yet that's about as consistent as Mega Bandit gets in this regard. It is truly the Rampardos of Megas, really earning that identical base attack. Now for some quick honorable mentions. First, Nidoking. Following in the footsteps of the Landorus Incarnate, it replaced upon the latter's ban from Gen 6 OU, and that its notably higher attack stat wound up easily surpassed by the utterly massive power of the special attacks it fired off when powered up by Sheer Force and recoilless Life Orb. There was little a team with Clefable and its bulky friends feared more. Additionally, we've also got Talonflame, who we've covered recently, but must mention again, since all of its stats are deceptive in some way. Not only is it a physical attacker with low attack and no major boosts, it's also an incredibly fast Pokemon whose defining ability gave it priority on its most important moves, and it also has been used for hit taking, despite its defensive stats suggesting it was even less appropriate for such a role than its attack. Plus, the Gen 9 OU incarnation of its Walling sees it using Flamethrower as stab, with a special attack stat markedly lower than its attack. Now for our finale, we have Cloyster. Cloyster is a cross-generational bombshell. Its base 180 defense stands out. This is on par with Deoxys attack and Mega Rayquaza's offenses. A defensive stat so absurd even its low HP can't quite fully undercut it. No, that's what the typing does. Yes, the low HP certainly doesn't help, but Rotom Wash has the same HP stat and is renowned for its hit taking. While an irritatingly high number of physical attackers that Cloyster would want to switch into can hit it super effectively in some way. Thus, though Cloyster does dedicate itself to support tactics as soon as it gains spikes in Gen 2, it largely goes more offensive when doing so. Sure, it can take quite a few hits in the process, but it focuses just as much on being able to land that one big hit, its explosion. It can't both boom and rapid spin, and it usually makes the more impactful choice, which is to boom, since its stab surf does an excellent job of warding off normal resist, making it quite easy to land a neutral explosion, and thus almost guaranteeing its target is KO'd. In Gen 3, Cloyster can finally use rapid spin and explosion on the same set, but Tyranitar Sandstream and Power Creep means it plays even faster than before, trying to stack newly multi-layered spikes before getting that boom off in a hurry, lest it get taken out first. In Gen 4, the Power Creep, Stealth Rock, and otherwise renders Cloyster most effective as an offensively geared Focus Sash lead, stacking spikes and the new Toxic Spikes. This lands a roll even in Ubers, but it's not what you'd expect of a Pokemon with such enormous defense. Then in the 5th generation, it changes direction and becomes one of the scariest threats in the game thanks to the absurd boosting move that is Shell Smash. Cloyster has a pretty good attack, but only pretty good, and while it's not dirt slow, it's also a far cry from fast. Yet, with a single turn of setup, it becomes one of the most frightening physical attackers around, courtesy of its instant +2 attack and speed, alongside one of the best stabs in the game, Skill Link Icicle Spear, which after 5 hits, clocks in at a stunning 125 base power, making it even stronger than pre-Gen 6 nerf Blizzard, with the multi-hit nature allowing it to bypass Focus Sashes, such as that of Magic Guard Alakazam, used as an emergency check to pretty much every other booster. This alone would have made Cloyster instantly threatening, but it was bolstered by coverage in another skill-linked move, Rock Blast, and Ice Shard to pick off the Scarf Latios that would outspeed it even after a Shell Smash. Alternatively, it could lean into the fact that Shell Smash also gave it a +2 special attack boost, despite the fact that its base special attack was even less impressive than its attack. Also utterly crushed several common checks to the standard physical variant, as Hydro Pump destroyed Magnezone and Fortress, while Hidden Power Grass blasted through Slowbro and Keldeo. But wait, where will this 50 base HP Pokemon with a Stealth Rock weakness find setup opportunity in such a power creep generation, especially since a Shell Smash set demands it be as strong and fast as possible, and thus means it can't afford any bulk investment? Not a problem. Even Cloyster without bulk investment effortlessly sets up against the metagame's omnipresent bulky ground types, which are essential for checking half the metagame, if not more. Yes, a Stealth Rock weak Pokemon that didn't seem especially strong, fast, or even bulky wound up utterly shellacking Gen 5 OU to the point of being banned. Forget Volcarona or Dragonite, Cloyster was the real danger and continued to have niches in OU in the generations after, even getting King's Rock banned since it had a devastatingly high flinch rate at over 40% when it was getting 5 activation chances each time it used Icicle Spear or Rock Blast, which was especially nasty since hitting so many times also meant it tended to crit quite a bit more than most Pokemon. And if you got crit or flinched once against Cloyster, you were probably toast. It was exceedingly rare that more than one Pokemon per team could take its hits. Cloyster was even useful in Ubers. It was still primarily a Spikes lead with Rapid Spin for opposing hazard setters, but with the possibility of Shell Smashing to punish not being given proper respect, with Icicle Spear being all it needed to cut through many Uber standards. Cloyster's stats were misleading one generation after another. In fact, they got more misleading with time as it became more dangerous. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Daniel Isbeast, Corman, Don Creek, Eric Dissing, Espion Lover, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megamon VGC, Mojo Game Slayer, Nurse Jake, One Penguin to Rule, Pretzel SP, Schmooter, Seagulls Incorporated, Soljiro Sakura, Spavoon, Skylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Tyler, Kiboflu, Wardine, Zathor for their major support of our videos.